This episode contains material including issues relating to suicide, suicide ideation, and mental health that could be distressing for some listeners. If you or someone you know is considering suicide, please text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline or dial 911 in case of an emergency.
This is Carrie Offstein-Rosenthal, and this is the podcast Held.
My love, you left me in the summertime, and all the leaves were on their trees, and all the flowers still smell so sweet. Then the cold
Angie, I want to talk about what it was like to move on.
What was your new normal?
I jumped right back into it and did not miss a beat. Everyone at that point had been and was continuing to plan for college. You know, I was not ready to do that. I was not ready to leave the protection and the comfort of my home. I ended up going to a local community college for my first year and moving into my own apartment.
That's a year after.
Correct. So a freshman in college, which was the year after that event, I felt like at some point I might be ready to leave and really put it all behind me. My sophomore year, I fell in love with Washington, D.C. and made the leap. And that is really when my next chapter started. And I was, new surroundings, new friends, new events in my life. And it felt like at that point I could let it go and start to really move on with my life and try not to think so much about what had happened and just enjoy.
When, if ever, did you share this experience with someone else other than your parents?
I shared it with one of my very dearest, best friends in those days, and still to this day, as a matter of fact. I was going through a very emotional time, and I recall she happened to be at home from college, and she came over, and I just sobbed and told her my deep, dark secret that I never expected to tell anyone. Now, this was a year and a half to 2 years later after the fact. And so to tell another person and discuss this with another person that wasn't my parents or my doctors was pretty huge. It's amazing when you start to really talk about things, how you can come up with details that you haven't been able to come up with before. And I do have some pretty now vivid memories of telling her and what that was like for me, and just hoping and praying that she would never share this information with anyone. And she never did.
Can you tell me what that conversation was like?
I remember there was a lot of crying. I don't know that I gave her every detail that I'm giving you. Mm-hmm. But I certainly gave her the story in a nutshell. I think her line of questioning was quite mature, and, like, how did I not know this? How did you pass this off? Just questions. And, whether or not we really got into the specifics, I can't recall.
Did you have questions for her about if she knew or if anyone was talking about it? Or
my inclination is to say no. And the reason why is because I probably at that point didn't want to know. Mm-hmm. It's still hard for me to hear about that now, that maybe someone suspected or heard. When someone says, "Oh my God, I never knew and don't ever remember hearing about a rumor," even though I am as old as I am, I still, for an instant, just want to be patting myself on the back. Like, well, there's just another one that you fooled and you did it. Now, if I use my adult brain, I think, wow, I've really lied about my life. Or maybe not that I have lied. I just have never come clean to the biggest, deepest, darkest part of me before. So I told Cindy and felt comforted by her. I trusted her.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in such a deep, dark, emotional place that evening for whatever reason. And, you know, she was there to comfort me. And I don't know 100%. In fact, I don't know to any degree that I called her with the intent that I was going to share this story with her. Initially, I called her and said, I'm in a way. Can you come over? And she came over. And, what we talked about initially, I don't know, but it led into this story. And again, whether it was my intent to have her over to tell her the story or just to be comforted by a friend, I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But I did tell her.
We are very fortunate because we have her with us today. As we said, her friend's name is Cindy, and welcome to the podcast. Cindy, can you talk to us about your experience, what you remember about Angie talking to you about this?
So Angie and I have been like best friends since junior high school. We became friends when we were in 7th grade. So 40 plus years. Let me just say this, that Angie and I had a pause in our friendship for about 12 years and came back together at our 30th reunion. Okay. And literally picked up as if we never even didn't connect. I feel like, so now we've been back together for like 5 years, but even prior to that, I would say she's probably was one of the happiest friends I had. Like, I felt like happiest, like together with her husband, happiest just in life. We've spoken once or twice a week since getting back together.
What was high school like for you?
We watched Knots Landing. Angie would have Knots Landing parties at her house. Those were so fun. We would hang out a lot in big groups. You have me triggering my memory. I like even post high, like I don't feel like we kept many secrets.
Okay.
I really don't. I'm going to fast forward. I mean, I remember her telling me that she kissed Randy and I was like, what the heck are you thinking? Like, you are going to ruin your friendship. And she was like, it was the most unbelievable kiss I've literally ever had in my whole life. And I was like, what? Like, just be careful with this. Like, we are all really close friends. And then, I mean, look what happened. It's just, so secrets weren't a thing with me and Ange, and we spent just a ton of time together. Meg, I remember their house, beautiful, very clean, impeccable house. I don't remember sleeping there per se. I don't remember spending an enormous amount of time there. Listen, again, my house was full of people always. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't unusual for people to be at my house, but I do feel like Angie was at my house, maybe to not be at her house.
Okay. So in high school, had you ever noticed any significant changes in her?
You know what? I don't remember that. I certainly remember who she was dating. If we were on spring break together in Hawaii, that was 1987.
After she had given birth.
Yeah, we went to Hawaii, our senior spring break. And then in our junior year, I mean, again, I don't remember any time where there was a pause other than later in life. High school, I don't really remember thinking, is everything okay? I don't have that memory of that at all.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think that's shocking to anyone who doesn't know the story. They just can't believe that no one knew.
I don't remember exactly the when, where, how she told me the way that she does. Mm-hmm. So I'm not pretending to think I knew when it all went down, but I also feel like I don't really remember the when she told me. So it's now that I've known for so long mm-hmm. that in my own head, I feel like I knew then, but she was like, you didn't know then. But again, I don't really remember the how and the when she told me. I just know that I knew.
So you don't remember seeing her pregnant, for example?
I don't remember seeing her pregnant. No.
You don't remember, for example, knowing she gave birth and going to the hospital to visit her.
Oh my goodness, no.
Right.
And I mean, in our heads, I think I speak on behalf of like anybody who knew her then, Angie, and still is like this beautiful figure, so skinny, like teeny tiny person. So I certainly don't have any vivid memory of her not being.
So I'm going to ask you, you don't happen to have your yearbooks with you, do you?
I have them in my house and I know exactly where they are, but I don't have them with
Go
me.
get your senior yearbook.
Okay.
In it is a picture of you guys. She said it's her only picture of her pregnant. And I'd be interested to see what you think when you see it.
So that must be it. And I have to tell you, again, I'm not convinced if we didn't know that we would know in that picture, but she has a very bulky sweater on in that picture.
Yeah. And like baggier pants. She said that's the only picture of her pregnant. If that's the one
Like literally the only one.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
And can you believe no one knew? These people, no one knew.
No one knew. What do you remember about the conversation, if anything?
Again, I know I knew all these years, but she has a very clear recollection and she has told me what she remembers about it. And like, she remembers us both crying.
She told me that. And she said it was when you were home from college.
I have no recollection of that. Isn't that terrible? Look, I knew. I never told anybody. Even when our friendship was on pause and I was upset about it at first, and then time goes on and, you don't quite think about it as much. I remember saying to my husband, like, I just can't even believe we aren't talking. I know things about her that nobody else knows. And I never even elaborated on what it was. Literally, I would have taken it to my grave.
That's insane.
Like I would have taken it to my grave.
Did you know how difficult this experience was for Angie?
I didn't know what a dark place she was in.
Yeah.
I was certainly one of her best friends.
But she tried to commit suicide.
She told me that. And like, Carrie, I no idea that she was in that bad of a headspace in a dark place. I had no idea. We didn't know.
Had you and Angie ever revisited the issue?
We had not ever revisited it. But I will tell you, I remember in my own head thinking sometimes, I wonder if she ever thinks about it. I guess I just felt like it happened, it was done, and she didn't ever really want anyone to know about it or to talk about it again.
What would have been the repercussions to Angie had she shared that she was pregnant in high school with your friend group? Do you think there would have been repercussions?
I think our guy friends would have been awful and just been not able to deal with that at all on a maturity level. I think some of our girlfriends would have been like me and supportive and fine with it. And maybe some others not so much.
What were your feelings when you found that she was so dark that she tried to take her life?
Oh, awful. I mean, like, again, we've talked about it now so much, and I just so wish that she would have maybe leaned on more people so that she wouldn't have felt so bad about how she was feeling about it, right? Like she kept it so to herself for so long. And, I just feel like had she gotten the right support from the people she needed it from, that it might not have been so dark, but that's devastating to hear. How awful.
In your mind, why do you think she tried to take her life? If you were just psychobabbling it out?
I think she probably felt like everyone would have been against her and her world would have been flipped upside down. And she probably didn't realize who she would have support from and who she wouldn't have had support from. And she would have been the rumor mill of school. I mean, you're talking about a 16-year-old. Now, mind you, no social media, but still, that would have flown through our school in a half a second flat. Mm-hmm. And I think she would have been ridiculed by probably a lot of people for it. Because
just to be clear, would you say it's fair to say that a lot of kids her age were sexually active at that time within your group?
Absolutely.
So it's not that she was having sex; it's that she had the baby.
The having sex part would not have been the issue with most.
Yeah.
Just the fact that she got pregnant and was carrying a baby and going to deliver a baby and all of that, and that would have been, I think, a big deal back then.
And did it surprise you, given her personality, that she tried to commit suicide?
Absolutely.
Did any of your friends, had there been a rumor? Had anybody thought it? Had anybody said it?
No one really remembers that. I will say this. I just, love her and love our friendship. And yeah, it's been 40 plus years of just amazing memories.
So Angie, after you told Cindy, did you tell anyone else?
It wasn't for many years later, that I told my best friend, who I happened to marry. He and I were living together, and I knew where I wanted the relationship to go. Unfortunately, Randy had to be told where the relationship was going, but I felt like in my head, there was just no way in the world I could spend my life with someone, even if we didn't end up together. I felt like even if we had a chance of getting married, there would be no way I would want to keep something like this from him. And I have specific memories of having him sit down and telling him, look, we've known each other for a million years, and you've been my best friend, and I've talked to you about everything in my life. You are the one who cheers me up and supports me, and yet the information I'm about to tell you is going to change how you think of me. I remember thinking to myself that this might really change what he thinks about me and decide he does not want to be with me anymore. So Randy and I have known each other since 7th grade, junior high, when he was wearing his AC/DC black concert t-shirt and I was wearing my preppy little ribbon barrettes. And, it wasn't for a couple of years that he and I were just really drawn together as just great friends and just friends. He and I went to our senior prom together just as friends. And when he and I got together romantically, it just all sort of clicked and made sense for me. And I was never that kind of girl growing up thinking, can't wait to get married and have a family and have the wedding and the babies. And yet that very first time things turned romantic, for me, there was no question. With the fireworks going off, I immediately felt like, oh my God, if I'm ever going to be with anybody, it's going to be Randy.
Take us back to the day you decide you're going to tell him. Walk me through what you were thinking about before you told Randy.
Like anything, I need to think about certain things before I do them, especially when it comes to telling somebody something that is difficult for me to tell. So I do recall thinking having this epiphany and thinking, okay, we may be getting to the point where I should tell him. I feel so close to him, and I'm going to tell him. And I think it took me some time to build up to actually telling him. And we had this cute little rental house living in Boulder, Colorado, and it was the weekend. And I remember sitting in a little office. He was sitting in a chair, and I remember coming in. My heart was pounding out of my body. I think I just gave him the quick story in a nutshell. And I don't know that there were many questions. There certainly wasn't a lot of discussion about it. I didn't give him many details. And that was the last time we talked about it.
Was he surprised? I mean, he went to high school with you. Was he like, wait a minute, we were hanging out together. What are you talking about? How did he not know?
So when I told him, he was just flabbergasted. How did I not know? How did you do this without anyone knowing? That line of questioning, at that point, I was probably not willing to answer many questions or divulge too many details. Not that I wouldn't have at some point, but I think that initial telling him was enough. And so I was willing to answer questions at another point in time. He never questioned it again. Over the years that we've been together and we've been married and he's known this information, there might have come a point and time where he said, wow, you have a kid. I chose to not know a lot of the details, as I said. And one of the details I didn't know specifically was exactly what date he was born on. I knew it was sometime very close to Halloween. So every year around that time, I would just briefly think about that time in my life and that baby. And so there have been times in our marriage during that period in the fall where I might have said to Randy, wow, I got a 20-year-old or I got a 30-year-old and it was really just in passing. And it was very easy for me to unlock and lock.
Did he reassure, like you went in there and you said, I have something to tell you that's going to change how you think of me.
Mm.
And how did he respond? Did he go, okay, and that was the end of the conversation?
I'm not sure that I really gave him a chance. I think I just sort of went into this whole big thing. I think I was very nervous, and I think he just sat there and listened. And I don't remember his exact response. We've been married 26 years together for over 30. So
just as a recap, you had told, obviously, your parents, Tracy knew, Cindy knew, and Randy knew before you heard from Zach. What was it like to tell people who didn't know, your friends who had gone to high school with you, your family, outside of your immediate family? And again, for our listeners, this is after the phone call when she was sort of forced to start telling people.
But we waited, I'd say, 10 days, 2 weeks to tell you and the rest of the family. And it really started hitting me what was happening. And people were starting to text family members. And once we started telling, people were saying things to me like, oh, this is so exciting. Congratulations. We're so thrilled for you. What wonderful news. And everyone was really excited. And so was I, when I would allow myself to access that.
Do you remember who you told and when? And talk about the order you chose to tell people and what was the thinking behind that? Was it like the hardest people first, the easiest people first? You had mentioned that Deb had said, we're going to do a little schedule. Deb being Angie's therapist, by the way. And
she really helped me through that period of time. And so for her to not really know me as she would come to know me, she set me up on a schedule. Okay, these are the 2 people you're telling this week. No more than that, no less than that. No pressure if you don't tell them, but you're not telling any more people than that. We'll worry about next week and who you'll tell the following. It's going to be baby steps. And we're going to start at the beginning, which for me at that point was, I gotta tell people. If this man is going to be a part of my life, and I was really certain that I wanted that, then I was going to have to tell. I was going to have to tell not only part of the story, but all of the story. In my eyes, it was family that I needed to tell first, and immediate family. So, my parents and my sister already knew. And next on the list would have been my in-laws, which would have included you and your mother and your brother and father and everybody on that side. And Those phone calls were difficult. Randy made some of them for me. There were certain calls I just could not either be on or could not make myself. There were certain people that I had to let know, but I just couldn't do it for one reason or the other. And I ended up emailing my story to several close friends. And I remember preparing to call you and your mother, who were together that day. And I remember being able to only really tell my part of the story and have Randy tell you the rest. Those phone calls were really hard. And having Randy's whole side, your whole side of the family, was very, very, very difficult. Equally as difficult was having my aunts and uncles and cousins find out, who I have always been super close with. I couldn't make any of those phone calls. My parents made those calls for me, but I knew that they were in the works and was nervous about it, even though I wasn't the one telling them. After the family, we decided to move on to friends, and I wanted to go with the most difficult first. And that would be my group of girlfriends. I knew that there was not going to be an easy out to this. I knew that there were going to be tears, and I knew there were going to be emotions, and I knew that that was going to happen on both sides. And I did call my group of girlfriends, and they were all horrific. Every phone call that I made pulled my heart out, and I'd hang up the phone and feel like I had just run a marathon.
Over what period of time did you tell people? How long did it take till you were sort of fully out?
Several weeks. There were some weeks where I felt stronger than others and felt like I could maybe make a phone call to a friend and discuss it, or I could tell someone new who hadn't heard yet. But it took some time to let everyone who I really feel like is in my world the truth about me and my past.
So you had said it, like Randy had told a lot of people, and you said that your parents told a lot of people, but I'm sure at some point those people reached out to you. And what was that like?
You know, it was actually lovely and hard all at the same time. I was hearing words that I just did not feel like applied to me. That, oh, you were so brave. How could you have been so brave? And wow, what strong choices, and all of these things that I felt that I wasn't. I felt like I had just put this all on myself.
And when they said those things to you, did you feel like a fake? What was going through your mind when they would say, you're such a hero, you're so brave, you're so strong, I'm so happy for you?
Congratulations, this is such a great thing. No disrespect to any of you out there. Carrie, I'm talking to you. For me to hear it, I wanted to say, fuck you, and throw the phone, because I didn't feel like it was good. I did have that ray of sunshine every once in a while, whose name is Zach, and he would text or call, and those were the only bright lights out of those days.
Like, how long do you feel like it took you? Let's talk about just your period of mourning, if you will. How long do you think that lasted?
Before I could really feel full force joy and not let any of the old shit come into play. As crazy as it sounds, I feel like it was 9 months. Crazy in that, 9 months is the gestational period. I would have these little marks for myself, especially at the beginning. Okay, you've known for a week. You've made it. I remember saying to Randy, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I think I mentioned that before. And he kept saying, Angie, but look, you're doing it. Yesterday was yesterday, today is today, and tomorrow you're going to do it again. You're going to be okay.
Was the period of telling people the hardest period, other than the reckoning of, oh my God, this shit is happening? And it's
yes. And really telling those people who have been in my life for most of my life, those people were the hardest. My newer, so to speak, friends, they did not experience that experience with me as my other friends did.
Could you tell the story about how you guys used to get together and watch Knots Landing?
There were a group of friends and a bunch of us got hooked on Knots Landing. And instead of just talking about it the next day at school, why wouldn't we just all watch Knots Landing together at someone's house? And I remember telling a friend, and he just looked at me just with bewilderment. And he said, wait, we came to your house for Knots Landing's party and you were going through that? Like, I could see that the wires were not connecting in his brain. We were together every week, every Thursday night. How did we not know?
And when you think back to those nights, do you remember watching Knots Landing while being with those people, and what was going through your head while that TV show was on? Were you able to be in the moment, or were you just like, oh, fuck?
I think a little of both. I was certainly very conscious of the way I was sitting, would always want to cover myself up or sit in a way that if someone caught a glance of me the wrong way, that they wouldn't be able to tell. I certainly was changing. My body was changing, and I had to do everything I could to hide myself.
Your biggest concern, obviously, as we've discussed before, was being found out. When you were sitting there, for example, I mean, I'm just contextualizing Knots Landing while at the same time, maybe you had just tried to commit suicide 3 days before. I mean, do you remember that? Do you see what I'm getting at? Like the idea that you're at school in math class going, not that you smoked, but we're in the smoking lounge. We had a smoking lounge in our high school. Do you know what I mean? Like just going through your dailiness with the secret.
Yeah, but again, that was what I did. I built up walls and I told myself what I could and could not think about, what I could or could not feel. And you know what? If I had friends over and we were watching Knots Landing, to the best of my memory, I think I was trying to just throw myself into the moment. But the second they left, you better believe I was wondering if they were talking about me or noticing something. We were in the popular group. This is just not something that happens to a popular girl in the popular group at Ladue High School. All I really wanted to do was just be in my room with the door closed, in my bed, in the darkness. But I knew I had to at least participate in some activities. I know in the end, I was uncomfortable and definitely showing much more than I had been. And so those first few months of school, I'm certain I had to have pulled away to a degree. I do recall when I told Krista my story, and after she sort of wrapped her head around what I was telling her, she pointed out that there was a period of time where we were really separate. And that time happened to have been the time that I was pregnant. And so, I pulled away from her, certainly not in a conscious way, but it was very eye-opening and cathartic, especially for Krista and certainly for me as well. And really just opened up this avenue for us to talk about the past and the hurt and the pain, and how ironic that I didn't want to tell her my story because I didn't want to hurt her, but yet by not telling her, I hurt her maybe even more.
Which seems to be a sort of reoccurring theme here, right? Because in every case, like with the suicide and whatever, each of the steps you were taking to try to avoid creating pain for someone else was really could have or did create pain for other people.
Yes, precisely.
Well, speaking of Krista, we have her with us today. Krista, can you tell us a little bit about how you found out and what your relationship with Angie has been and is now?
I met Angie in 5th grade at our elementary school, Reed School. We have stayed friends since 5th grade.
So how would you describe Angie?
We just bonded. We seemed to gravitate towards the same friends, and she was more brave about like wearing things that were like the new trend, and I had to wait till everybody else wore it. She smiled. She was warm. She was easy to get to know. We did lots of sleepovers when we were young. She spent a lot of time at my parents' house. And so she would come swimming over there and we would do water ballet routines to the go-go's. You know, she was close with my parents, especially my mom. So when the boys started coming into the picture of our friend group, but then also some of our friends, Angie included, started getting boyfriends. Mm-hmm. The relationship changed, but not bad. What I thought was interesting about Angie compared to my other high school friends, she always included me, and I mean especially with Mike.
Why don't we talk about her relationship with Mike?
I mean, I was kind of like their little sister. I mean, we had so much fun. I laughed so hard with him. He was always so funny. And Angie thought he was funny. And I mean, there was never a dull moment. We did a lot of partying at his house, mm-hmm. drinking, smoking pot. Most of our sophomore year, for sure our junior year, Angie would have some of the girls would spend the night at Mike's because it was just too late. Uh-huh. And they would sleep somewhere else. I don't even know how we all slept there. I liked their relationship. It was so fun. But then she started pulling away from me.
In high school, had you ever noticed any significant changes in her?
So the only change is that she started becoming very distant. I'm pretty sure it was all of senior year. So my mom was very involved in trying to support me through this. I don't think I told anyone. And the only time I really remember specifically that I was so upset was our senior year spring break, which was in March of, she's still 17, she's about to be 18. We went with 10 girls to Hawaii, and she and I were part of the 10. And I was so nervous about the trip because I was worried she wasn't going to talk to me and it was going to be awkward. And I just remember feeling this, like, I still don't know what I did. I don't know what I did. All I remember is senior year, she was pulling away. I don't even remember if I said, what did I do? I don't remember if I ever confronted her or anything. Well, then I went off to college. I think, you know, we had fun at graduation parties and stuff like that. And she came to my graduation party and we hugged goodbye after, you know, but then I think we talked off and on, but it took a while for us to get back to whatever you want to call normal. Okay. And we were living in other states and everything. And then slowly but surely, we never discussed it and we became close again. And that was awesome. But I always knew in the back of my mind, like, whatever happened. Well, then, you know, the summer of 2017, we decided at the reunion, we're all going to go to Nashville in the fall to celebrate 50. Angie and I hung out a lot on that trip in kind of a smaller group. And then at one point we were talking in the lobby of this hotel, and out of the blue, it was just the two of us. And she said to me, I'm so sorry about what happened in senior year. And I mean, I was like, I didn't even know what to say. I started to almost cry. And then I said, it's okay, but I never really knew. And all she said was, it was my fault. It was a huge moment for me because she acknowledged it. And then I felt like Angie and I got even closer after that. Mm-hmm. So then fast forward 2021, that she wanted to do a conference call. I'm going to take it as a sign. And the way it worked out was best. She and I ended up speaking alone. So Angie and I had a time where I was going to be alone. She was going to be alone. And we spoke on the phone alone, just the two of us. And she starts telling me the story. And she said, I had a baby. And I selfishly stopped her and said, oh my gosh, that's why you pushed me away senior year, because you were so close to me. I was almost like another sister to her, really. And she had a closeness with my mom that was a lot different than her parents. And I think she had decided in her mind she was not going to tell anyone, and she wanted to bury this secret. And I felt relieved. Like, she was worried that I was going to be mad. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I get it. Like, I didn't do anything. And it was something that she was struggling with her. And then, of course, I'm like, who's the dad? But I knew it was Mike. I knew it was in my heart of hearts. And she's like, I got to get through the story. I got to tell you in a certain order. I'm like, okay. I'll wait. And now she is more open and she will cry and she lets it out. But she cried a lot through that call. So I will say I have felt like relieved for our relationship. And I think she didn't realize she pushed me away until she's learned more about herself and what she went through. So she knew she was pregnant when she turned 17 in April of junior year. I do, though, that summer, we spent the night at my aunt's after a party because we remember it was the summer before our senior year. I mean, she was pregnant, but I think she started pulling away in the fall of our senior year. Some people remember her wearing bigger clothes. I don't. I mean, that was kind of the style.
Had you ever thought that she was pregnant at any point?
No, not at all. Like, I was shocked when she told me. Now, I do think it was interesting. One of our guy friends said to me after we knew, he said, I was good friends with her and I don't remember her being around all of fall. So I don't know. Everyone remembers bits and pieces, but nobody that I know, no one knew. I'm just so glad. I'm so proud of her. I mean, that she's telling her story.
Yeah.
And I know it's so hard.
Well, and to that end, did you ever have any idea? I'm assuming she told you about her suicide attempt.
Yes.
To that end, when you had heard about that, what were your thoughts?
I just felt so sad for her that she felt that alone and couldn't come to me. I mean, and I was like this other sister.
Does it surprise you she didn't tell you?
No, because I do think that she has a private side of herself.
What do you think it would have been like had she told people in high school? Do you agree that it would have been like
yes,
a pariah kind of thing?
Yes, and I understand.
Can you walk me through that from your perspective? 1987, not today, Ladue High School.
Yes, I mean, I think it would have been really, really hard. I think all of our friends, felt like we grew up in these nice families. Anyone going through that would think, oh, well, that wouldn't happen to our group of friends. Just this stigma that maybe we put on those types of situations that if it was going to happen to us, we would have to bury that secret or there's other things that, that people might have done. And that's why I'm been telling Angie that I'm sure there's friends in our group that had abortions. And so
would it have been worse if she had carried the baby to term and everyone knew in our school at that time?
I think it would be super hard for her. I think it would have changed some of her friendships. I think she would have, yeah. So I get it. I 100% understand why.
How did you feel when you heard Angie had a son?
So I wrote her a big letter afterwards. And I just said, this is more people for you to love. This is so healthy to bring in these wonderful people into your life. I can't wait to meet him. I don't know when it's going to be, but.
Okay, so on that note, knowing Angie as long as you have, would you say you've noticed a change in who Angie is now that the secret is out?
Even though she's so happy, really, with the outcome.
Yeah.
But she is also the first to admit how hard this has been. And now she can be more who she always had the potential to be. And I do think it's helping her relationships. I mean, I feel like our relationship is the strongest it's ever been.
Me too.
And I know when secrets are buried, it's so hard.
Inevitably, I think it's also so important just to be who you are and know that is okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that not only is it okay, but it's amazing. I mean, the thing that I think about is, she had those miscarriages and
yes. Oh my gosh.
I always thought she would be such an amazing mom. And so I'm so glad. It's funny because Zach said to me, what did you think when you found out? And I was like, I'll be honest with you. And these are things I don't know if you would know, but like when my grandparents were sick, Angie was so there for my family.
Yes.
She was in Wichita, living there, taking care of my grandparents. And I mean, that's the kind of thing you don't forget. You know, she's always been this incredibly generous spirit. And then, like, you know, I always thought, like, oh, she would make the best mom.
Yes. Me too.
And then when she had these miscarriages, and then they were like, well, you know, this isn't the right thing for us. We're not going to have a baby. I was like, okay, you know, everyone has what they want and whatever.
Mhm.
But when I found out about Zach, I was like, oh, thank God she in some way, shape or form gets to use that parent muscle, because she has it in spades. Do you know what I mean?
She totally does. I think people have wondered if maybe she didn't push the whole pregnancy thing because she felt bad that she had given up a child for adoption. But I don't know. I mean, that was 16, and then this is, and then when she was wanting to have a baby, it was years later. Yeah, I am so glad that the two of Angie and Randy have this family.
Yeah. So Angie, was it difficult to receive love because you didn't, when people were offering it to you, because you didn't think you deserved it, because you thought it was bullshit? Why was it so difficult?
You know, I was so raw with emotion. I think I really did feel the love that was being shared with me during those conversations. I wasn't accepting of any of the praise, but the love I really needed, and I knew I needed it, and I allowed myself to feel it and accept it.
So we talked about some of the tropes you found difficult. What discussions, if any, soothed you?
I felt comforted by a lot of the conversations, by a lot of what people were saying, which is, we love you. This doesn't matter. This doesn't change who you are in our eyes. It's all very difficult for me to take in. Just the love surrounding this story, my sadness. Not that I thought that they would stop loving me. Maybe they would like me differently. Maybe they would see me differently. Yeah, certainly that. And look, part of the story that is extremely sad. It just is. I was a young child who made some really stupid decisions and lived through a really hard time.
What did you learn from any or all of these conversations? Did a different truth arise? Did you have like an epiphany at the end of these conversations? Like, oh, well, everybody still loves me. Or did it just not come for 9 months?
I was waiting for something to hit me, or just that I would just wake up one morning and think, oh, I feel such relief. Everybody knows now, and I am so loved, and it's all good. I was waiting for that moment, and it didn't happen like that at all. Once the most important people were crossed off my list in terms of the people that are closest to me, it still took me several months.
To what?
To really process that the burden of this secret and of the shame, of this judgment that I felt would come my way, it all didn't happen that way in the end.
How did it happen?
An outpouring of love and understanding, and definitely sadness and tears and emotions and questions. But the bottom line is, no one died because I told them this story. Nobody had a heart attack. Nobody stopped talking to me. Nobody judged me in the way that I felt was going to be judged. I was going to be judged, and really,
except
there would be no way I could stop judging myself. And I am working on that. That'll be a piece that'll have to just come later.
What's interesting is the secret You worked so hard to keep this secret from everybody else. And the only person who really couldn't accept it was you.
And to this day, it doesn't seem real. I am sitting here telling you the story, and it feels like I'm describing a movie to you or somebody else's life, or it doesn't. There are days that I am more connected than others to my truth. It has been really, really hard. Let's just say that. The second I heard about him, the second Randy said, I got a phone call from the wife of your son. For me, that changed everything. And as much as I didn't want that phone call, in a sense, it made me feel okay. It made me feel, I don't know, full.
Well, because you chunked out a big part of your life. You sort of like were a cookie with a bite taken out of it, and you just threw the bite away. And I don't mean you threw them away, but you were hiding it, and it was somewhere else, and it wasn't part of your life, and you weren't integrated. And then suddenly you were like, oh, here's half that cookie. I'm going to just put it right back together, and now you're integrated again in a way.
And yeah, in a way, it does feel like that. Part of what was so confusing to me in terms of my feelings is that how could I be feeling one way, but also be feeling that I can feel such extremes about the same situation. So as desperate as I was to rewind and not have ever received that phone call, I also could not be more excited for this man. And again, it hasn't been until fairly recently that I've really allowed myself to feel the feels. I have allowed myself to think it in my head, but I haven't really been able to feel the feels until late, which is part of why you and I are talking right now. I'm so insanely proud of this man, and I want to scream from the rooftops who he is, and that I'm so proud of him, and that my blood actually runs through this incredible human. But how in the world could I just announce that he's my son and not tell the whole backstory? And so I think the fact that I allowed myself to feel this incredible joy for this man, now there's no going back. Now I just want everyone to know him, know about him. And again, that means being really open and raw and vulnerable and telling my truth now.
So Angie, it sounds like in every case, in your parents' case, your sister's case, Randy's case, and Cindy's case, you told them, but then you shut it down again. So really, you told them, but you didn't excavate the secret, right? It was still a secret.
The secret became everything. That secret just kept snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. And
it's interesting that you said it when you were talking about your sister. You said it when you were talking about your parents. You said it when you were talking about Randy. You said it was so unfair of me to do this. And I just want to say, I think this is what you were capable of doing at the time. To be hard on yourself for doing it, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't do it differently today, but it means that you're judging that kid, and that poor kid has had enough pain and judgment on her.
I just should have done it all different.
This is Carrie Offstein-Rosenthal. You have been listening to the podcast Held. Thank you for joining us. And thank you too to all of our guests, Krista, Cindy. We hope you'll follow us and tell all your friends about us. See you next time.
If you or someone you know is considering suicide, please text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline or dial 911 in case of an emergency.